Welcome to the Energy Tech Podcast. I am hosting on this episode. I'm Mike Lotus with the Energy Tech Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about our Connected by Design series, Data-Driven Transformation with Ignition, MQTT, and Snowflake with my honored guest, Mr. Arlen Nipper. Arlen, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Mike. Looking forward to it.
Oh, man, it's great to have you on the podcast finally. We look forward to having you here and just really working with you on what you're doing. You know, I follow you a lot in terms of what you're doing for the industry. So, again, I'm really excited to have you. So I think today, Arlen, what we're going to do is really do a good dive into leveraging Ignition, MQTT, and Snowflake. And you're the right guy for this. And again, I just want to welcome you to the show. And thanks for joining us. And, I did want to ask you, you came here to Canonsburg. What do you think?
Oh, man. It's nice.
Yeah, beautiful.
I had no idea. Yeah, it's a really nice suburb area of Pittsburgh. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful part of the city. We're here at the Energy Tech Podcast, which is OpSite Energy's control room headquarters. And, seated here in Canonsburg is you have what I call an energy corridor, is the best way I can put it. You've got CNX resources, you've got range resources, you've got the folks from EQT, UGI, DT Midstreams here. So you've got some players in the Appalachia that sit here. And our goal is that some do listen to the podcast. So what we're going to be focused on is, of course, leveraging Ignition, MQTT, and taking data to Snowflake. And it's geared towards oil and gas. And, just for anyone that has never tuned in before, Arlen, if they have not tuned in before, you are the CTO. Is that the right term? President CTO of Cirrus Link. Kind of give me that relationship that you have in terms of Cirrus Link with your end users, as well as with key partnerships with Ignition and Snowflake.
Sure. So literally, Cirrus Link, we were started 12 years ago, but we've been the only strategic partner with inductive automation for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So really what we do, and I can bring it up on the slide here actually, we 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, we work on modules for the Ignition platform. Yeah. And all those modules are leveraging MQTT technology. Yeah. So the great thing about Ignition is it's got a very sophisticated, nice tag management system. And we're able to tap into that tag management system and then either with our MQTT engine module to receive messages from MQTT and create tags automatically.
Yeah, let's go back to that slide. I think you can see some of those products, Arlen. So just walk us through. You got a few of these, which are key components.
Yeah, the MQTT engine,
right?
Which again is that component that goes out, connects to a broker, and automatically discovers new tags and can create those in Ignition.
Yeah.
The distributor module is actually a fully compliant MQTT broker that runs as a module on Ignition. So for small projects, it's great. Everything is contained within your Ignition, that Ignition instance. Then the transmission module it's kind of the reverse of engine in that it takes any of your tag structures in Ignition, and if you choose to, your UNS definitions as well, your models,
right,
and publish those out using MQTT Sparkplug. Then we do have recorder module,
right,
and this is really think of it as doing a SQL insert from a field device.
Right.
So we originally designed it so that we could publish EFM events, history, and alarms without touching them. So atomically, we wrap them up just how they came off the flow computer, and we can drop those into an SQL table in Ignition. Then we do have our injector modules, Azure Injector, AWS Injector, and then we have the EFM protocols for ROC and for legacy ROC and legacy ABB Total Flow. And actually, we'll be demoing that today.
Yeah.
We do have a standalone Sparkplug aware Chariot MQTT broker that's designed for OT.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of cloud brokers out there. Hive MQ is great, EMQ is great, but for on the OT side, you really want just a keep it simple, stupid, standard MQTT broker, and you want multiple of those for redundancy within your OT network. And then what we'll be demonstrating today is that we worked with the Polaris team at Snowflake and created the IoT Snowflake.
Yeah. So, Arlen, when I think of the products, I don't think of them as just a list of products, okay? What I'm seeing are the fact that that Cirrus Link is a strategic partner with Ignition. What I see is someone, you, and a lot of credit to your team and Ignition for listening to the industry, for things that make it simple. Yes. So I think what you're doing here is you're bringing OT to life in that you're making OT reachable, attainable, flexible, with some great architecture that can be utilized for different producers and users, right? End users. So I don't just see a list of products like you said. To me, it's more about that you're listening to the community. Right. So you're listening to end users and supplying them with quick deployment products that are flexible for the industry. Right. That's kind of the way I see it.
Well, and I think what's very important is that, yes, all of the features in MQTT engine, transmission, distributor, those were all, they were pretty raw when we brought them out 10 years ago. Right. And it's all been 100% feedback. A lot of that feedback originally was from the Ignition Oil and Gas Collective. Right. We would go there, they would say, hey, Arlen, we need this and we need that, and can you do this and these features? But what you have to realize is that we didn't just go out and code up a MQTT transmitter and then quit. I mean, right. We literally we stay up with every single code release from inductive automation, so we have to stay abreast of that. And right now, as you know, 8.3 Ignition is coming out, yes. So we are totally to our eyeballs in trying to get all that ready for I believe the beta release is going to be the end of this month.
Yes. Yeah. And so surprisingly, that's where I met you, Arlen, was I was with Howard Energy, and we were looking at some data aggregation products with Ignition, and you were there at the Ignition Oil and Gas Collective, which is, for those that don't know, and if you're a producer, I encourage you to join the group. This is a group of users that are your peers. Anyone that's a producer, a midstream, anyone in the value chain, if you're drilling, completing, and flowing back wells and put them into production, you want to join the IOGC group because you get a really good education on how they're implementing Ignition, and you get to hear about the issues. And then you have the Cirrus Link folks, Arlen and his team, that are responding to requests, pain points in the industry. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big deal.
And maybe we should make sure we get that link included.
Yes, good point. So yeah, I'm co-hosting. Jeff's doing the production magic in the background, and we have Brian on the board from the control room. So we're gonna provide those links to the IOGC, some additional links to Cirrus Link. So beyond you liking and subscribing, we really want you to grab some of those links. In fact, there are some key videos that have already been put out about some of what we're going to cover, and the team at Inductive Automation Ignition, along with Arlen, have done this. And so for us, this is a great demo from Arlen himself to the energy tech community, where you may not go out and watch all the inductive automation videos, but you certainly would tune in here. So this is why we're doing this, is so that we can get that same experience on your demo, Arlen, and we want to capture that. And so before we kick this off, I want to kind of set this up for folks, because you have the super majors. You know, when we think of oil and gas producers, you've got your majors, you've got the Chevrons, the Exxons, the BPs, and we get those. I think that and you have what we call mid-market players. You have the EOG resources. You have those regional players like CNX resources in their respective regions. But what Arlen, each one of them have is they have a lot of the same pain points and headaches when it comes to OT data, right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter how big you are, or if you have 500 wells in West Texas, or you've acquired property in Louisiana, or you've got a play in the Bakken, you still have the same pain points in terms of OT data across the industry, right?
Right. And you know, I've been in this industry since really 1980 onward. And it's interesting that, you know, things have gotten a lot better.
Yes.
But if I look at how we put a SCADA system together at Coke Oil in 1980 and how we do it today, you know, conventionally, it hasn't changed that much. And that's really, I think, what MQTT, these modules for inductive automation, and the kind of the community around inductive automation, changing landscape.
Yeah. So let's kind of get into a little bit, Arlen, here on some of the pain points you see in terms of, you know, the OT side of this, right? You've got where everyone says, "Hey, it's not that big of a deal." You know, we can connect all kinds of OT data, but in my experience and in yours, I think you've said this before, that it they've complicated it, right? In terms of getting OT data out from the field.
To a large extent, yes. I mean, um, we are going to have to pull legacy equipment.
Yeah.
There's no getting around the fact that we need things like Ignition Edge, or you know, a Moxa box out in the edge somewhere, or something to do that conversion for us right now.
Yes.
Now, ultimately, and we're getting there. Like ABB's new flow computer publishes Sparkplug, MQTT Sparkplug natively, the Opto 22 equipment, the Phoenix Contact equipment, a lot of the Advantech equipment, but we still, you know, right now, even in this demo, we're going to have an edge device sitting
Yes.
in front of legacy equipment. And that what that does from my perspective is that if I've got an edge device right out in the field by the legacy equipment, that means that probably I've got a subject matter expert sitting there configuring that, going, okay, I know how this rock flow computer works. I know I want
Yes.
these TLPs. That Alan Bradley, I know I'm going to pull it and get these registers out, and then I'm going to contextualize them.
Right.
And I'm going to contextualize them at the edge,
Right.
where the subject matter expert lives. So, you know, our tenets have been, you know, decouple as far out as possible, connect your devices to infrastructure, not to other applications. So that means publishing that into an MQTT broker. Now I'm decoupled. I could have Ignition connect to it. I could have a number of other applications connect to that same MQTT broker and discover that data automatically. So decouple, provide a single source of truth,
Right.
be able to demonstrate a superior OT system first. So if I can't talk to a operations manager or a SCADA manager and either show them or tell them or convince them this is not a better, safer, more secure, more scalable, more reliable infrastructure, then they're not going to switch.
Right.
And they're going to stay stuck in the past.
Right.
But if you can, now you're set up for the next step. Because if you have enabled your OT infrastructure with that type of tooling, you're ready to go to the next step, which is to the cloud.
Right.
And what we're going to show today is the Snowflake Data Cloud platform. And then there, of course, if you look at what Snowflake offers, that means you've got access to all 8 or 9 of the current LLMs. You've got, you know, access to AI, you know, anomaly detection, machine learning, or
Yes.
just getting it out there to know that maybe it's just reporting to the flow computer that we're going to connect to.
Right.
Maybe it just goes into our reporting system so that we have a real-time enterprise view of what all of our flow computers in the field are doing right now.
Right. Yeah. So, let's set this up, Arlen, with just a simple architecture. What I'm hearing is at the beginning of this, you want to get your single source of truth as close to the field. We use the word the edge, but what we're talking about is as close to the field as you can get it, because that's where it's living. That's where it's that's the origin of the data. That's the holy grail information you're trying to get out.
Right.
And you've got to create some sort of context to it. And a lot of that begins with some key UDT architectures or UDTs, via Ignition, right, to set these up. And again, there are some best practices for doing that, for setting up those UDTs. And so if you've tuned in and you're maybe not using Ignition, or you are, in the middle or beginning of doing that, there's always some best practice for UDT architectures to get that data ready to be contextualized, whether that's an Allen Bradley PLC. Some of the great tools already can work through that and have some edge capability like Opto22. But there are some where you've got to define that edge device to work with you on that. So what I'm hearing is that's where you want to begin.
Right.
The next step after that is you're standing up Ignition, right? And then you're going to leverage an Ignition platform. And there, again, through Ignition, there's different platform setups. In this case, you'll be demoing a Flowboss 107, which is typical in the industry for measurements, right? So you'll have a meter run at Flowboss 107. You'll have some additional meter runs that may be out there in your field. So that is kind of what we'll be targeting a little bit here, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So let's kind of get this going.
Okay.
Arlen. Take us in the direction where we begin with an architecture and what that looks like.
Okay. Well, first thing, for this, we're going to leverage MQTT benefits. Now, regardless of whether that's Sparkplug or MQTT JSON or whatever, right off the bat, you're going to get 80% bandwidth reduction. That is from the field versus polling, from the field into an Ignition gateway, and then from an Ignition gateway again into a platform like Snowflake. So 80% less data means 80% less cost, and we're going to show you have the same granularity. If you can prove that you can do report by exception, which we have over the last 26 years, if we can do true report by exception and it's time stamped, now we can go to last known good. We can put it into a time series format and have the same granular, in fact, better granularity than if you were polling every value every time. So I poll, valve open, poll, valve open. Valve open's been open for the last week. I'm still polling it. Valve's open.
Right.
So I've wasted all that bandwidth. So I could have gone publish, valve is open. Stateful, I haven't lost state. Now, a day later, it could go in transit and go closed. But that's 3 messages, not 30,000 messages.
Right, exactly. So your number one, what you just said there is first of all, it's smaller packet sizing, so it's lightweight.
Yes.
You've got this lightweight protocol now. We've reduced the bandwidth. We don't have to pull. And in a lot of cases, when you talk about let's just pick on it, like a Flowboss or something, they'll refer to those as snapshots because they're polling, right? It's a snapshot.
Right.
But in reality, with MQTT, you can get down to sub-millisecond data, which is just, if not more valuable and more granular. And you're not re-recording, like you said, a stateful status because you already know that. You're really only getting a report by exception, meaning I found something that changed. My engineering unit changed. My temperature went from, whatever that was in a degree Celsius or Fahrenheit. I saw a 3% change. Well, that's important to know. But if I was keeping that same value, I'm not interested in that.
Right.
I'm interested in that report by exception.
Right. Exactly. Now, the other thing, regardless of its field to Ignition or Ignition to the cloud, you're going to leverage the security aspects of MQTT.
Yeah.
Now, we recorded a session on that just previous to this, but very, very quickly, that means that we're making an outbound connection from the field devices. It's using TLS. But now if I go do a security audit on that field location, there are no ports open, right? It's an outbound connection. The same is if I have a corporate ignition instance and I want to make a connection to Snowflake. Again, that's an outbound connection to an MQTT broker in the IT cloud. And again, no ports open in the control room or wherever that's at. So that's what we're going to be leveraging with MQTT. And then if we look at leveraging ignition, so if you just go to ignition, well, what is it? Well, it's SCADA, it's HMI. Right. Oh no, it's alarming system. It's reporting. Oh no, it's got a time series database with it. It's all those things. And we're just going to be touching the tip of the iceberg on this demo today. But the way that we look at ignition is a tool.
Yes.
So it's a data ops tool. It's a tool for enterprise connectivity.
Yeah, I think of Ignition as the IoT platform helper in the architecture. So it serves many purposes. And for a lot of folks that don't know, if you're not using Ignition and you have a fancier, or I don't call fancier, I say a larger paywall systems and DCS platforms, one reason Ignition fits the bill is, Arlen, it's used by a vast majority of the Fortune 100. So in terms of manufacturing and other verticals and oil and gas. So it's a big player.
Right.
It's a tried and true product.
Yeah, and if you just look at it from a Cirrus Link standpoint, we have well over 2,000 discrete companies using MQTT Sparkplug technology. And that's spread across pretty much every vertical now.
Yeah. Wow, that's a big that's a big case for implementing Ignition. The other final things I wanted to point out, even about Ignition itself, Arlen, is that you can download it for free. Ignition offers free training through inductive automation, and you can basically some unlimited tagging features and its ability to test it before you buy it. I think that's one of the benefits of things like
no, absolutely. If you think of, and let me put this in context. I go to colleges and I talk to engineering students and stuff like that. Now, if I've got this audience of college graduates and said, well, if you're going to go into automation, how many of you ever heard of OPCUA? Raise your hands. And it's crickets, right? Modbus. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
But if I ask those students, how many of you have a Raspberry Pi in your dorm room and you're using Node-RED and MQTT, over half the class raises their hands, right? And so that's really what we're talking about is using technology. And I think by getting this into our infrastructures, we're going to attract more young talent coming in because wow, I know how that stuff works.
Yes.
Now, on the flip side, with Ignition, you could, if you're a college student listening to this, you can download Ignition, get it up and running for free, go to Inductive University, find out how all the tools work, and you can do all of that for free. And it's amazing the number of times that we get an order, a very large order from a customer. Never heard of them, never contacted us, nothing.
Yeah.
And we come to find out that they've been off a year, 2 years. They built the whole project. They've got everything up and running. And now they go, okay, now let's license it.
Let's license this thing. Yeah. And you're right. So there's a technology expectation, I think, is what we're getting at. And I know, I don't want to steer us off because we're talking about this demo, but one of the things I've learned in this business is that there's a generational shift that's happening where there's a digital and technology expectation for these open architectures, flexible, lightweight, report by exception, right? Which is, I guess it's almost like a given. It's an expectation of the product.
Right.
They also want to try it before they buy it. So that's a big thing too.
That's got to be. Yeah. I mean, again, if I was to replay that same thing again and say, how many of you kids in college, how many have a Allen Bradley PLC and can pay for the programming software. Nothing. So you literally don't get started out of the blocks because there's a paywall to even get started. Whereas with Ignition, MQTT, Raspberry Pi, Node-RED, all of that's consumable technology by anybody that wants to take a look at it.
Right. Exactly.
So now we've got this notion, and then let's go one more step. Again, we recorded a session on MQTT, and we learned that, we learned that with MQTT, the great thing about MQTT is you can publish anything you want on any topic.
Right.
But the problem with MQTT is you can publish anything you want on any topic.
Right.
So what we're using is we came up with Sparkplug, which is a specification that says if you're going to do MQTT, this is a really good way to do it. So it defines a well-known OT-centric topic namespace. And what do we get with that, Mike? We get plug-and-play auto-discovery.
Right.
Because if we have a well-known topic, if I subscribe to it, it comes in, oh, Mike, I know where it came from. I know the context of that payload. I know everything about that. So now I've got plug and play.
Right.
Second thing is that with Sparkplug, uniquely, we can publish a template definition from the edge, from all the way out at my flow computer on a wellhead. And what that means is that I publish my template for my digital twin, which is awesome. We can do that. And if it changes, we republish it. If it changes, we republish it. So again, we're maintaining that notion of a single source of truth.
And an active, and also you're getting that active contextualized information, right? Still remains the same.
Exactly. Now, third thing that Sparkplug does is it defines the encoding of our process variables. So instead of me having just a Modbus register 40,001 or an Allen Bradley register N1B2, I've got a object that gives me the name, the value, the timestamp in milliseconds, engineering high, engineering low, deadbands, and anything else with Ignition. You could add custom properties to decorate that measurement so that when it hits Ignition, when it hits Snowflake, any other cloud system, you have that contextual data that will be available to everybody. And then the last thing.
So it went from being isolated to being meaningful. Right. Now it's a meaningful, other than being stateful, it's also meaningful information.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of, Mike, that's Modbus register 40,003.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
That makes sense to Joe Blow, the automation tech or the SCADA tech, but it doesn't make sense to Mary in accounting. Right.
Well, and that, Joe in automation might appreciate that because when he comes back a year later, he might not remember what it was.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, and the last thing Sparkplug does is it defines state management. MQTT has state. We have statefulness, so we can do report by exception. But the other thing that does in Sparkplug is that if we lose our network connectivity, that means that MQTT transmission module that I showed you a while ago goes into store and forward mode. So anything that we would have published goes into a store and forward queue with the timestamp so that when the network comes back online, we can take all of that data, set the history flag on it, and publish that out so that for it, like with Ignition, that all goes into our time series database so that the network can be offline, come back online, but we don't have any gaps in our time series database.
Right.
So with all of that, what that starts looking like from a topology standpoint is with Ignition platform, we get all these protocols. Last week at Intellect, we just announced another one from SiteSync, one of the automation partners, that now we have the ability to read part 4 to 20 milliamp transmitter information as well. So all of this, think of that as feeding raw automation data into an Ignition platform. Okay, that's great. Once it's there, now we've got the ability using the UT editor to build a model, instantiate that model, creating the asset or the digital twin with all of the contextual information for that. Now, once that's been done in Ignition, You can set up the transmission module to point at that tag provider where all this information is. Now it's contextualized. Now the transmission module can grab that tag data, grab those UDTs, publish those using the Sparkplug specification to an MQTT broker.
Yeah.
Now, where does it go from there? We don't care. We're decoupled from our standpoint. We're doing what we're supposed to do. We're publishing it to an MQTT broker.
I want to remind users of one thing, Arlen, on that what you said here, because you've got the context, you've got the data, it's coming from the edge. This also benefits someone operationally that installs a new device. If I have less work, less hands rolling up in re-adding an additional device, because once I add an additional node to that on that side of the system, then I can immediately publish up those values. Is that right? I mean, if I'm
it's plug and play,
it's a plug and play.
It'll automatically discover an ignition. So there's a good use case study on the Ignition website. It's a video where ARB Midstream implemented a complete brand new midstream, and they did it in less than a year. And I forget how many booster stations and tank farms that was. But the point is that once they had configured one site with the edge information, all of the other ones, they could install it. They published all their tags. They automatically populated an ignition. The dashboards were already built and were up and running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there you go. It's a plug and play methodology that reduces lots of time it takes to add those devices.
Yep,
for sure.
So our topology starts looking like this. We've got ignition out in the edge, out in the field, as Mike said, or we've got ignition edge, and that's connecting locally to that flow computer, to that PLC, to that pump off controller, to that gas chromatograph, to that LoRaWAN sensor, to that heart transmitter sensor, and it's taking that information and publishing it to an MQTT server. Now, in the drawing here, I've got Chariot, but again, this needs to be an OT server, MQTT server, that's guaranteed not to drop quality of service 0 messages or anything like that. We just keep it simple in that area. Now, that is connected to the MQTT engine in Ignition. So what we're going to see is we're publishing information from the field. We'll have our connection disabled to begin with. We'll connect that, and we'll see it Ignition auto-discover that rock flow computer and some other devices that we've got in the field. Now, from here, you're going to see that we're going to be able to take those UDTs, build some screens, do something with it in Ignition. And again, we're not even touching the tip of the iceberg of what you can do with Ignition. This is just a data demo more than anything.
Right.
Now, we've got it in here. We've got these nice data models, these definitions. We've got the UDT instances, the digital twins. We've got everything, and then corporate comes and goes, oh, you know what? We need all of that in a data cloud platform. We want to do AI, predictive analytics. We're going to do reporting. We want to share that data with other customers, right?
Right.
So we would like to get that into the Snowflake platform, and we're going to show you that we're going to be able to do that through the IoT bridge for Snowflake without writing a single line of code. So really, the advantage of Snowflake, if you've not heard about it, it sits on top of your Azure instance. It sits on top of your AWS instance, and so it literally is using that infrastructure that you've got, but it's basically abstracting the complexity away. So, this is the actual kind of a topology that's been genericized from an actual customer trying to do this with a cloud platform natively. And they had all of these different services running from a data lake to a relational database. They had Python code running just to get a piece of information, that single source of truth, from the edge, from the field, to an application like Power BI. But notice here, Mike, that there is no single source of truth because it's been managed and manipulated so many times through this flow that you really don't know where it came from.
Right. And so what you have is this complicated data pipeline is really what you've got here.
Right.
That you said has no, you've taken away the meaningful portion of the data unless you're in there with a team of folks that it might make sense to. And you, again, Arlen, like you said, it's not decoupled, it's heavily managed, and you have a complex data pipeline.
Right. Right. Whereas what I'm going to show you is the way that I look at Snowflake and Ignition is we're taking Ignition platform using an open international standard transport MQTT Sparkplug to a data cloud platform. So we're connecting two platforms with an open standard protocol. And that's really how much it simplifies it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So let's go back to our topology drawing and let's jump into this Ignition edge out here that's connected to a ROC Flowboss 107, amongst other things. So I'm going to open the Ignition Designer here. So it's right here in the center of the screen. And we're going to go in here, and the first thing I want to do before we actually look at a UDT is I want to go in here and create a new folder, and I'm going to call this raw data. Okay, so we've got that. Now I'm going to go into the OPCUA tag manager in Ignition, and from that I'm going to select raw data, and I'm going to browse down here to my Flowboss 107 driver, and I'm going to pick up a area that it's doing called meter run number 1. So this is the, if you're familiar with ROC, it's called TLPs, type location parameter. And so these are all of the TLPs that you would need to define a meter run. And we're going to import those. Okay.
Yep. And again, when you're originally looking at these TLPs,
Oops, hang on, let me do that again.
Yeah, looking at originally at these TLPs, they make sense only to the measurement guy, measurement guy, and the SCADA guy.
Yeah, wait till you see these. Hang on, I didn't do that quite right. Meter config, meter run 1, raw data. Click button to take it over there. Okay. So now let's look at that. Now, Mike, this is going to be easy peasy, right? Okay. Boom. There's all that raw contextual data that we have. So literally, that's I think that's like 80 tags that you would need to properly configure a Flowboss 107 flow computer. And other than to a guy that's lived sitting on top of a Flowboss 107, that's absolute gobbledygook. So
yes, yeah.
Let's step back and let's go into our UDT editor, and knowing those tags exist, let's define a UDT that helps us simplify and contextualize anybody upstream on the enterprise is going to have to be dealing with this data. So what we've done is I've taken all of those raw values you just saw, and I've put them into folders.
Right.
And so here I've got the atmospheric pressure, and it says atmospheric pressure. And if you look over here, you can see where it came from. It came from ATMPRS, and I renamed it atmospheric pressure.
Right.
And you go down through here, we've contextualized those. But here's one that's interesting, is that for of flow computer, we have tons of enumerations. These are the easy ones to look at. So I've got a pipe material enumeration that came out of a flow computer, Mike. It's an integer value, and it's a 1. So so that data I had a while ago, if I publish that as it was raw, the IT, the cloud, they would get a 1. What does that mean?
1 what? Yeah.
1. Well, is it better than a 2? Or is it, So if we go up here, what we've done in our UDT is we have another tag called pipe material, which if I look here, that's going to break apart that cryptic enumeration. And it's going to say, well, if it's a 0, it's stainless steel. If it's a 1, it's Monel, 304 stainless. So again, breaking all that hidden information up and making it contextual.
Yes.
So now I can apply that UDT. We'll come back over to our tag structure, go into our nice UNS naming of, enterprise, site, location, device, and we'll drill in here. We've got our meter config, and it's nice and contextualized. And here's all of my, really humanly understandable things. It's stainless steel. It's Monel. My gravitational acceleration is entered. Atmospheric calculation is entered. But that again was an enumeration. So we've got all of that, and we're happy that's configured at the edge. So with that, we're going to pop back to our ignition gateway. So I'll pull up the topology drawing real quick. So that is a Flowboss 107 out here at Ignition Edge. And now we're pointing it at a MQTT broker. So we'll go into Ignition and look at that. So here I'm in that Ignition gateway, and we'll navigate to MQTT engine. And you can see here, it's like, well, wait a minute. I don't have any edge nodes, and I don't have any devices in a UNS structure here.
Right.
Well, okay, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go in to my configuration, and I'm going to enable MQTT engine. And when I do that, I'm going to go out and connect to that broker that edge device with the Flowboss 107 is connected to.
And auto-discover.
And auto-discover it. So we'll enable MQTT engine. Okay. That's done. We come over here, and lo and behold, here's our UNS, Acme Oil, Site 1, Pad 1, Well 1, Meter Run 1, Meter Config, and Meter Data. And we didn't have any UDT definitions before, and those all got published in as well. So now I can take this, and now without writing a single line of code, without configuring anything, I've got a really complex Flowboss 107 meter config coming in. So one of the advantages with Ignition is that if I can write templates that you can apply to UDT definitions.
Right.
Let's see here. Here we go. So that I could build out, basically an automatically populating dashboard of all of that information. And I could build that automatically when it comes in. So now we've got that, and you'll notice here that we also had a couple of other sites come in that I'm simulating, a pipeline booster station that's got a motor UDT, it's got a pump UDT. We've got a tank farm where we have a UDT that represents a tank that has a level process variable, an interface value, a high alarm, and a temperature as well. So now I've got this, and this is kind of that we're happy with this. This is a single source of truth. And what I would like to do is I would like to get that into my Snowflake instance, my data cloud platform.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Snowflake and get a native app that installs the IoT bridge for Snowflake.
Yeah. And this you can get from the marketplace.
Yep, from the Snowflake marketplace.
Yeah.
And when I do that, it's going to go into my Snowflake with proper permission. It's going to create two very simple databases, a node database and a stage database. And if I look in there, that's going to have some views that have been pre-populated, because what we are going to do is we are going to take the Snowpipe streaming API, and we're going to drop Sparkplug, MQTT, they're expanded to JSON. We're going to drop those into that SQL database. But right now, you'll notice here that I don't have a Acme Oil UNS folder showing up.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is going back to our topology very quickly. we're going to enable the MQTT transmission module on the ignition gateway. We've got the IoT bridge setting here, so we'll go do that now. We're going to our transmission settings, and we will enable MQTT transmission. Now, it's very important to understand here that what happened there is that transmission went in, it went up to that tag, that MQTT engine tag provider.
Right.
It grabbed all of those UDTs using Sparkplug and it published those. Well, first it made a secure outbound connection, a
Right.
TLS connection. So again, from that dotted line there, I have no ports open, right? Then I start publishing that information to the IoT bridge. On this side, it has a MQTT client that understands Sparkplug. And on the other side, it's connected to the Snowpipe streaming API. So that lets me do sub-millisecond inserts into rows in the SQL database on Snowflake. So now if I come back to my Snowflake console, and here, we'll refresh that, and lo and behold, Mike, we've got a Acme Oil Site 1, Site 2, Site 3, and if we drill down into that, we've got views already created, and we've got a view of our Flowboss 107 and a view of all of our meter data. Now, before I drill into that, we also will look in here and notice that I can ask the SQL database now, since I know what my schema is, I can ask it, Mike, what UDTs do we have? And look here, we've got a Flowboss meter, and we've got a pump, we've got a
that's
gas
as easy
meter.
as a select all in the database. And because it is, we're calling it like a SQL on steroids.
Yep.
Arlen, you can articulate that with SQL queries pretty easy from there
Absolutely.
in Snowflake.
Yep.
So the other thing I recognize is that it's got the full context of what it had even beginning at the edge, and it's just carried over, and it's meaningful now in not just a SQL database, but in the cloud platform. It's there.
Right. Exactly. So now I've maintained my unified namespace, Acme Oil Site 1, Pad 1, well 1, meter run 1, meter config. And you'll notice that for every column, those are populated. So if you could imagine connecting your Flow computer to something like a Snowflake data cloud platform and having that go in. Now, this isn't very interesting because we, for sake of time, we could go change an orifice size, we could change a material, and those would be entered. But if we go over here, since we've connected, we do have meter data that is coming in. And you can see here that every time we've had a daily a hourly flow rate or a flow time update, that published a new message that populated this row. Now, again, we go down to one of these, to our maybe a Site 2, and look at a motor UDT.
Yes.
For that motor, if we look at a data preview on that, we're just publishing, like once a second simulated data. But I want to point out that the as of view is hydrating the columns, whereas this is a sparse view. And what people have to realize is that Power BI, Tableau, Grafana, AI tools, they don't like sparse data because we are publishing report by exception. So this view right here, these are each little exception that came in. I'm going to put them together because of the time series lead live features within Snowflake, and we are populating all the columns with hydrated data.
With hydrated, yeah, exactly. So you got the hydrated data, and again, that makes it easy for other products on the other side of Snowflake. We'll say on the other side, but in Snowflake.
Oh, absolutely. As this stands right now, they have a connectors already made. So I literally now in 1 minute could be connecting Power BI, Tableau, or Grafana to these columns of data.
Or on the other side, it might be we talked about yesterday. There's opportunities for Maria or InfluxDB to be connected. So you have another. We'll call it a SQL to SQL, right?
Yeah.
One of the other examples, Arlen, that I want to bring up is we're working a project with our partner, which is CNX Resources. And one of the interesting things is CNX has a radical transparency program that is collecting air quality data for the state, we'll say the state of Pennsylvania. And so what happens is you want to create the single source of truth, and the state wants that data, and they want it in a context that they can use it. So without having to connect additional devices, you can basically collect the data at the edge, get that into Ignition, contextualize the data. And in one of the things about Snowflake is it offers clean room technologies.
Mhm.
All that is saying, we're going to give you your untouched data in SQL tables in a database so that the state of Pennsylvania has comfortable, secure information that they can leverage on their own,
Mhm.
and it's provided at the single source of truth.
Yep. And that's a lot of the customers that I have today using Snowflake. One is they're putting they're putting their SAP data in there, they're putting their CRM data in there, and they want operational data just to fill it out.
Yeah.
And the second thing, especially within the oil and gas industry, is Snowflake can share data securely.
Yes.
So if I'm a producer and I want to share my data with somebody,
Yes.
and I've already got it in Snowflake, it's a zero copy share
Yeah.
of all of your information between your business partners.
I'm going to give you another example, Arlen, and this is common. You might have a joint venture between two oil and gas companies. I'll give you an example. I might be Howard Energy, and I have a joint venture with Valero. And what's happening is my data, instead of Valero punching a tool into the OT network over here,
FTP.
yeah, and all that,
Yep.
get away from FTP, get away from an OT device in their OT network saying, hey, let's have a shared custody meter, or whatever the case is. My point is that you can easily leverage edge data, the single source of truth, Ignition, into Snowflake, and now Valero's a Snowflake customer or not, and either way, the data is available in the cloud for both parties.
Right.
And I think that is what, if you're a producer, you need to get that, because you don't have to, you no longer, as the result of, and I know we don't like the word, but as the result of both the digital twin, the IoT bridge, and the availability of Snowflake, you can now stay away from the OT network, maintain your cybersecurity posture, while at the same time giving context to data that's meaningful anyway. Right.
So, in summary, what we showed is that, and we have a lot of customers using this very topology diagram, is that I've got Ignition Edge in the field. I have an Ignition Gateway in the field connected to all my equipment. I've got the ability to stand up a broker, at least one, but typically two or three for redundancy and high availability. And those are going into my corporate Ignition Gateway. It could be Ignition Cloud Edition. It could be just a corporate image of Ignition running. And that lets me collect the data from all my sites.
Yes.
And now I can aggregate that all in a common area. And then having the ability, and what I just showed today is that I defined a model at the edge of a very complex device, and I didn't do anything other than connecting to a broker to get it into Ignition, and I didn't do anything other than connecting to a broker to get it into Snowflake.
Yeah, and Arlen, I want to capture something here, because it is easy. It is keeping it simple. How do we keep it simple? You define those UDTs. That's some homework. Then you standing up an edge device, or edge capability, Ignition for free. You can get a Snowflake for free for 30 days,
Yep.
which means you can test that environment and get into what we're going to call an extra small database for 30 days for free. I can stand up Ignition for free, and I can start talking, and I can demonstrate exactly what you did for the most part for free.
Yeah. exactly.
Yeah.
And you could say, hey, this does work, and it's really easy to put together.
Yeah.
So, I think that leveraging these type of technologies, Snowflake, Pugel John McCarran is the CTO for Snowflake manufacturing and oil and gas.
Yes.
I knew him from a previous life when he was at AWS with their IoT products. And he called me right before Christmas 2 years ago and said, hey, Arlen, I'm the new CTO for Snowflake.
Yeah.
And I go, great. What's Snowflake? Because I had never heard of it. But in the subsequent years, it's amazed me at the number of oil and gas manufacturing across all the verticals. Their IT department are already using Snowflake.
Yes.
And they haven't bothered to tell anybody about it.
Right.
So now I'm literally, when I do demos to OT, and I go, have you asked IT if you're using Snowflake? And 50% of the time they go, oh, Arlen, we're using Snowflake. So anyway, maybe it was IT found it and it was the best kept secret. And
Yes.
they're not going to tell OT.
Yeah. And so, in terms of energy tech, I've seen this, Arlen, deployed. So if you're a listener, and it's not just relegated to production, if you're looking for sub-millisecond inserts in drilling, the completion spread, in flowback, in production, on your pipeline, the movement of rail, that's another one where I saw the application of the rail UDT for your rail cars, the tracking of rail, trucking, saltwater disposal, ticketing, you name it. I think that this applies very easy for those parts of the value chain in a way that is simple. And again, without writing single lines of code, this makes it easy for operations to transfer knowledge between field teams. So if I'm the automation person and I have a great UDT structure, I can pass that to the SCADA team, that in turn passes that to IT, OT, and those conversations. And IT gets it just as much as the automation superintendent that's in the field, because why? We both have the same contextual data. We're on the same page about it.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
Arlen, that to me is great. I love the demo. And, one of the things I want to do for listeners is we're going to share, aside from the podcast sharing that, there's some insights. Again, Arlen, you've done a fantastic job, you and the Cirrus Link team. So we're going to provide some links for Cirrus Link to be able to reach some great tools. There's also some great pieces from Snowflake. I want to mention that one of our partners, IDM, is also a Snowflake partner. So we can get you on the right path. You'll have plenty of tools that you can grab on this episode. Share it. And we really want to leverage Ignition, MQTT, and the power of Snowflake. And then we just touched the tip of this, Arlen. And thank you again for joining us. This was a great demo. And catch us again on the Energy Tech Podcast. I am your host on this episode, Mike Flotis with the Energy Tech Podcast. Thank you for joining us.